House will be in order. Members, clear the well, clear the aisles, find a seat, remove conversations from the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and exclude extraneous material on the further discussion of H.R. 1892.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 734, I call up the bill H.R. 1892 with Senate amendment to the House amendment to the Senate amendment thereto, and I have a motion at the desk.
Clerk will report the title of the bill, designate the Senate amendment, and designate the motion.
H.R. 1892, an act to amend Title IV United States Code to provide for the flying of the flag at half-staff in the event of the death of a first responder in the line of duty. Senate amendment. Motion offered by Mr. Frelinghuysen of New Jersey.
Pursuant to House Resolution 734, the motion shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Frelinghuysen, and the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Lowy, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
A few minutes. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to present the Senate amendment to the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 1892. A bipartisan. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. The House is not in order.
I rise to present a bipartisan bicameral bill outlining the funding for the next 2 fiscal years and funding for the government through March 23rd, providing much-needed emergency supplemental funding for disaster recovery and raising the nation's debt ceiling. This legislation will help our nation move forward without the threat of a shutdown or default and with greater budget scrutiny. This bill will also allow us to move past the destructive cycle of continuing resolutions, which undermine the appropriations process and promotes only more uncertainty and doubt about our government's and this Congress's ability to function and to meet the needs of those we represent. I'm pleased that this legislation includes an agreement reached on a bipartisan basis by House and Senate leaders on spending caps for both fiscal year 2017 and 2019. Especially important is a substantial increase in funds for national defense. Our nation faces multiple security challenges and an increasingly aggressive, not to mention well-equipped, adversaries. We must be prepared to meet these challenges, and we must take care of our men and women in uniform who truly do the work of freedom. After years of reduction in military funding and months of uncertainty caused by continuing resolutions, it's time we provide our armed forces with what they need to rebuild and keep our nation safe. The agreement also outlines investments in important bipartisan domestic priorities, such as fighting opioid abuse epidemic, supporting veterans, and rebuilding and renewing our infrastructure around the nation. These top-line spending levels will enable us to get to work immediately on our 12 appropriations bills to wrap up the fiscal year 2018 and quickly turn our attention to fiscal year 2019. This legislation also includes a short-term continuing resolution, our last for this year, which will fund the federal government through March 23rd. This will maintain programs and services that all Americans depend on until all annual appropriations bills can be enacted. I look forward to working with our Senate counterparts to negotiate and complete all of these bills ahead of that deadline. In addition to these critical pieces of government funding, this legislation also provides $89.3 billion in emergency disaster funding that has been urgently needed since this House passed its version in December. This funding will provide the residents of Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands and western states with the resources to rebuild their lives after last year's historic and devastating natural disasters. Lastly, this bill increases the debt limit through March 1st, 2019, so we can pay our bills and avoid the economic damage of a default. Mr. Speaker, the Senate has just passed this bill, and now it's up to this House to do the same and to send this legislation to the President for his signature. I urge a yes vote on the bill and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized for as much time as she may consume.
It is a basic constitutional responsibility of Congress to fund the federal government, and Republican majorities in the House and the Senate are just turning the process into an embarrassing spectacle, running from one crisis directly into the next. It has been clear for 9 months that a bipartisan budget agreement would be needed to enact appropriations law. Yet it has taken 5 continuing resolutions, 2 lapses in funding, countless hours of effort to take even this first step toward full-year funding bills, more than 4 months into the fiscal year. I am pleased with many aspects of the budget agreement. Increasing statutory spending caps would allow the appropriation committees to write responsible, bipartisan spending bills that will invest in the nation's families, communities, and national security. I'm also pleased the legislation would provide funding for families and communities in Texas, Florida, California, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands to rebuild their lives following natural disasters. Unfortunately, this legislation cannot be considered in a vacuum. The Speaker of the House refusal to commit to considering bipartisan legislation to protect teenagers and young adults from deportation is unjustifiable and maddening. Dreamers are sons, daughters, parents. They are students and teachers. They serve with distinction in our armed forces. They pay taxes and contribute to their communities. President Trump and the Republican majority hold the lives and future of these children and young adults in their hands. Yet their only concern seems to be how much they can extract in exchange for doing what a decent human being should do simply because it is right. I cannot vote in good conscience to provide immigration and customs enforcement the very funding that could be used to deport the dreamers. I cannot vote to continue the appropriations process while an unthinkably tragic fate hangs over the head of 1.6 million young people. I do hope that in the weeks ahead, a bipartisan bill for dreamers can pass the Senate and enough pressure can be brought to bear on House Republicans to act. History, my friends, will condemn these Republican majorities if they fail to do what is right. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Jenkins, a member of our Appropriations Committee.
Gentleman from West Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow members, West Virginia is literally ground zero in the opioid epidemic. Our overdose rate is not just a little bit higher than the national average or the number 2 state. It is actually 33% higher than the number 2 state. So when we passed 21st Century Cures legislation dedicating $1 billion to fight this horrific epidemic, it gave us hope. It gave me hope. And that hope was particularly strong in rural states like West Virginia, that finally we might see real resources where it really counts in rural communities. But unfortunately, many of the worst hit states like mine ended up receiving only minimal amount of funding. Let me give you an example. A more populous state received 5 times more funding than my state, but my state's overdose rate was 5 times higher than the more populous state. This bill, like every bill, has parts I like and parts I don't like. One of the issues I've fought for, making sure that now $6 billion we are putting towards fighting the opioid crisis will actually get to the places where it matters most. We must use a formula based on per capita statistics to ensure funds go to the hardest hit states and smaller states where the crisis and the need is the greatest. As a member of the Appropriations Committee and having a direct hand on how the $6 billion will be targeted, I've been reassured that rural states like mine will not be shortchanged, and we will work to make sure the language in our funding bill makes it abundantly clear to the federal agencies that actually set the allocation formulas. We want resources flowing to where they count most. I want to thank Chairman Frelinghuysen and his predecessor, Chairman Rogers, for their commitment and leadership to helping. I yield back.
Expired. The chair would remind the House to come to order. If you feel the need to have a conversation on the floor, please take it off the floor. Now the gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Mrs. Watson-Coleman.
Gentlelady from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for yielding to me. Mr. Speaker, the Speaker of the House is supposed to be the Speaker of this entire House. And the entire will of this House and the Democratic side and the Republican side is to pass a DACA bill. But we are running out of time. Instead of following the bipartisan consensus of the majority in this House, this Speaker is yielding to the will of the majority party's anti-immigration fringe unilaterally. And that fringe is led by this president. If we continue to bend to this fringe, this body, this shining beacon on a hill, this hopefulness in this country will go dark. The Senate was able to pass the bipartisan agreement due to the hard promise of Leader McConnell and the good work of our Democratic leadership as well, to simply allow the body to vote on a DACA bill. We, however, have no such commitment on this side. 22,000 dreamers in the state of New Jersey. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're connected to their churches, their parents, their teachers, they're business owners. I spent time in a church where a Christian tithe-paying immigrant was taken from his family and put in detention. He was not a threat to anyone. My constituents did not send me here to deport young people who are American and know no other country. I ask you, I beg you, I implore you, do your job. Save these dreamers. And until we do, I urge a no on this vote. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentlelady from New York reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey. Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, a member of the Committee on Appropriations, Mr. Aguilar.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a choice today. I want to compliment the work that the committees have done to reach an agreement on these funding levels. I'm not here to quibble with those funding levels. What I'm here to ask for is a chance. If this is the people's house, we deserve an opportunity to address these issues. I've never said this is a bad deal. I've just said this is an incomplete deal. It isn't complete because we haven't had the commitment that we need. The commitment that we need to address critical issues that are important to our communities. We've addressed some in this: opioids, community health centers. Those are important issues in all of our communities. But we haven't addressed issues that are important to everyone. Like Letty Herrera, who was my guest to the State of the Union, who lost her sister in December, who's scared, who wants to know when her priorities are going to be our priorities. She wants to know when we're going to bring up these issues. And I can tell her, the Senate has a commitment. They're going to talk about these issues. But the People's House has not said that we're going to talk about these issues. We're going to say, well, when the president signs off, then we'll have a conversation. He doesn't have a card that votes in these machines. He has a voice. He should be consulted. He doesn't have a voice on the People's House. He doesn't have a vote here with me and you. All we want is a commitment to bring up a bipartisan, bicameral bill that addresses these issues. All we want is a chance. All we want is an opportunity to address these issues that are important to our communities. Please, please, please give us that opportunity to have that conversation. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentlelady from New York reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey. Gentleman from reserve. Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentlelady from New York.
Reserve.
Reserve. Who seeks time? Gentleman from New Jersey.
I have the right to close.
Gentlelady from Gentleman from New Jersey reserve. Continue
yes,
reserve.
I reserve.
Gentlelady from New York.
I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, the Democratic leader, Ms. Pelosi.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Yeah, I could.
The House will come to order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I thank her for her outstanding statement of values and what our country is about. Thank you, Congresswoman Lowy, for your extraordinary leadership. And I thank all of our colleagues for the unity that we had over the months when we were having this debate about what this bill would look like. And I want to again read a letter that Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Clyburn, and I sent to the Speaker last night, or I guess this night. And this is what it says, because I think it's very important for people to understand the simplicity of our request, the fairness of our request to the Speaker.
Gentlelady will suspend. The House is not in order.
It says, Dear Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady will suspend until the House comes to order and the Chair recognizes the Gentlelady again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The request comes from the body, and I'm trying to let the Gentlelady be heard.
I thank the Speaker.
The Gentlelady can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of bipartisanship, we write to you again to reiterate our sincere desire to ensure that the government remains open and that the priorities of the American people are properly addressed. As you know, Democrats have been clear that we support a budget agreement that ensures that our men and women in uniform have the resources they need to protect our country and themselves. This bill will provide the middle class and working families in our country have the tools they need to succeed. As part of this agreement, we have always expected that the House and the Senate would address the issue of DACA and our Dreamers. Most of our members believe that the budget agreement is a reasonable compromise to address America's military strength and critical domestic priorities, like fighting the opioid crisis, boosting NIH, moving forward to resolve the pension crisis, caring for our veterans, making college more affordable, and investing in child care for working families. Indeed, that is what the fight has been about all along. We have to fight the resistance on the Republican side to invest in the domestic agenda. So I was pleased to hear some of our Republican colleagues talk about some of the things in this bill that we on the Democratic side insisted upon being there. And so, Mr. Speaker, we're writing again to request that you make a public statement regarding the scheduling of a vote on the DACA bill. That is our request. That is the request of the House Democrats. Our request, and Mr. Hoyer and Mr. Clyburn sent this letter last night, our request is that you publicly state that you will schedule a vote to consider the bipartisan Hurd-Aguilar bill and any other DACA bills that you wish to consider under the Queen of the Hill rule. We strongly believe that members of the House and their constituents deserve the same dignity that Leader McConnell has extended to members of the Senate by stating that he will allow a vote on this issue. And we asked him for his immediate attention to this issue, but we did not receive that back. I said earlier that America is the greatest country that ever existed in the history of the world. Aren't we proud to be Americans? And what is America? America is a country of great people, of beautiful diversity that have changed over time from the days of our founders. E pluribus unum, they said. How they could never imagine how pluribus it could be, how many different people. And yet they established a constitution that enabled everyone, as they stated in our Declaration of Independence, everyone the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And who is our country has become a more diverse country over time, but still e pluribus unum. And this vote today, we're just saying pay respect to the fact that we are a nation of immigrants, constantly reinvigorated by newcomers coming with their hopes, dreams, aspirations, courage to make the future better for their families. That's what America is about. That's what the optimism our founders was based on, that every generation would take responsibility. So these newcomers have made America more American. And then who is America? America is our great Constitution of the United States, our great Constitution which we take an oath to support. And what else is America? America is our great patrimony, this beautiful land that God has given us to be stewards of.
The gentlelady will suspend.
I'll wait for the speaker.
Please take all conversations off the floor. Gentlelady, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Great patrimony of our country. And it's important to know that our country is our 50 states, the District of Columbia, and our territories. And in respect for that, I'm very pleased that in this bill we were successful in the negotiations to get more funding for the territories, especially Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, an increase over what was in the original disaster bill. But there are other things that it's important to note that are in this bill. Again, opioids and mental health, national institutions. These were Democratic priorities that we fought for, and that's why this took so long to come to fruition, because there was a resistance on the Republican side to invest on the domestic side. So they have been increasing the defense number, which we go along with, but want it commensurate increase on the domestic side, recognizing that domestic side for us in our budget, appropriators know this better than anyone, includes security and functions, Homeland Security, the State Department, Veterans Affairs, anti-terrorism activities of the Justice Department. So there's much security on the domestic side, and that's why we insisted on increasing the number. And that did happen. That did happen, and that's why I'm able to say in this letter that there are many good things in this legislation. But for some reason, sometimes I think the Speaker thinks he's Speaker of the White House, not the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and that we should have the opportunity, touched a nerve there, I hear, and we should have the opportunity to have this House, the People's House, work its will, not be the recipients of something that might, as he said, well, if it passes 60 votes in the Senate and the President approves, then maybe I'll bring it to the floor. That's not a commitment. And just let me say again, what an honor it is for any of us to associate ourselves with the aspirations of the dreamers in our country. They are so magnificent. They're so magnificent. They are a model of patriotism to our country. And all they wanted was the recognition of the Speaker of the House that they were worthy of that. I'm almost finished, so it doesn't matter. In any event, or I could go longer, in any event, and I thank the various speakers who were presiding the other day. I thank the speakers for their courtesies extended, and you too, Mr. Speaker. But here it is. Yes, I was one of the 4 principals with the White House negotiating on this legislation. A lot of it came our way. You know why? Because nobody wants a shutdown. And this is a good bill. It doesn't do everything, but it's a compromise. But the one thing, the one message to allay fear, to build confidence, to honor the vows of our founders that we could have done is to say, we, the United States of America, in this people's house, want to assure you that we will allow the House of Representatives to work its will. Let the chips fall where they may, but give us a chance to allay the fear that is in the hearts of these dreamers and their families and remove the tears from the eyes of the Statue of Liberty observing what is happening here. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlewoman from New York reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentlelady from New York.
I'm prepared to close. Does the gentleman have any further speakers?
Gentlelady from New York reserves, then the gentleman from New Jersey.
I yield to the gentlewoman to close, and then I'm going to recognize. You're going to close? I'm going to yield my remaining time.
Okay. The gentleman from New Jersey
now.
will continue to reserve while the gentlelady from New York closes.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time to close.
The gentlelady is recognized.
A fifth CR, while one party controls all levers of government, shows the Republicans' inability to govern. Even more upsetting is their refusal to put a bipartisan dreamer bill on the House floor. While there are provisions in the Senate amendment Democrats support, we implore our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do what is right and permit a vote on a bipartisan dreamer bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield a minute to the Speaker of the House, Mr. Ryan.
The gentleman from Wisconsin, the Speaker of the House, is recognized. And the balance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief. A few hours ago, the Senate passed this agreement with a very big bipartisan vote. 75% of Senate Democrats, 68% of Senate Republicans. Republicans and Democrats coming together on a true compromise measure. I think that's a thing to celebrate. It accomplishes what so many of us have been fighting for. First and foremost, this agreement accomplishes getting the resources that we need to rebuild our military. But also, this includes long-delayed disaster funding to aid recovery from the hurricanes and the wildfires. Money to fight opioids, something that knows no partisan boundaries. An extension of important health care programs. This agreement will also allow us to step off this carousel of short-term funding bills that do nothing but hurt our military and stymie our ability to focus on other important agenda items. And I think that's been noted here tonight. You know, most Americans, they're not even awake yet. Or maybe they're just getting up for the first shift. By the time they catch up with the news this morning, they will see one of two things depending upon what choice we make here right now. Either Congress will have done its most basic responsibility, funding the government and taking care of our brave men and women in uniform. I really believe that that's what the majority of the people in this body wants to see happen. Or they will see a second needless shutdown in a matter of weeks. Entirely needless. Republicans will deliver more than our share of votes this morning. I urge my friends in the minority to stand with us on this bipartisan bill. My commitment to working together on an immigration measure that we can make law is a sincere commitment. Let me repeat. My commitment to working together on an immigration measure that we can make law is a sincere commitment. We will solve this DACA problem. Once we get this budget agreement done, and we will get this done for no matter how long it takes for us to stay here, we will focus on bringing that debate to this floor and finding a solution. But we cannot do that unless we pass this budget agreement. Our military can no longer be held hostage in this process. So for this morning, let's honor our troops. Let's do our most basic job, and let's pass this bill. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 734, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Freelandheisen. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion agreed. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those in favor of a recorded vote will rise. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this is a 15-minute vote on the motion to concur. Will be followed by a 5-minute vote on suspending the rules and concurring to the Senate amendment to H.R. 582 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 240, the nays are 186. The motion is adopted without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is a question on suspending the rules and concurring to the Senate amendment on H.R. 582, which the clerk will report by title.
H.R. 582, an act to amend the Communications Act of 1934 to require multi-line telephone systems to have a configuration that permits users to directly initiate a call to 911 without dialing any additional digit, code, prefix, or postfix, and for other purposes. Senate amendment. Senate amendment.
Okay, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and concur to the Senate amendment? So many as far in favor say aye. Those no. Opinion of the chair, 2/3 being the affirmative, the rules suspended. The Senate amendment are agreed to without objection. Motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose, the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet on Tuesday, February 13th, 2018, when it shall convene at noon for the morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to take from the Speaker's table H.R. 1301 with the Senate amendment thereto and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1301, an act making appropriations for the Department of Defense for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2017, and for other purposes. Senate amendment.
Is there objection to consideration of the bill? The clerk will report the amendment.
Senate amendment, strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following. Section 101. The Continuing Appropriations Act 2018, Division D of Public Law 115-56 is further amended by inserting after Section 165.
Consent to dispense with the reading.
Without objection, amendment is agreed to. The bill is engrossed, read for the third time, passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to take from the Speaker's table House Concurrent Resolution 104 with a Senate amendment thereto and concur in the Senate amendment.
The clerk report the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 104, concurrent resolution providing for a correction in the enrollment of H.R. 1892, Senate amendment.
Is there objection to consideration of the concurrent resolution? The clerk will report the amendment.
Senate amendment, strike all after the resolving clause and insert the following.
New Jersey seek recognition.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading.
Without objection, so ordered. Without objection, the amendment is agreed to. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Speaker,
I
move that the House to just adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until noon on Tuesday, February the 13th, 2018, for morning hour debate.